Well,
thank
listen,
you.
and here we are. Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of the Mighty Blaze, the initiative meant to help authors and independent bookstores and readers during this very weird time of the pandemic. This is one of the most special interviews we've ever had. First, look at this gorgeous cover. We are here with my literary heroine, Lauren Groff, and I can't believe that we actually have her here. Thank you so much for coming here, Lauren.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It's great.
Well, I'm going to give a little intro to Lauren, and also we want to encourage everybody, please buy her book, bookshop.org, or any other place where books are being sold, particularly independent bookstores. Okay, so Lauren Groff is the finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and a two-time National Book Award finalist, and the New York Times bestselling author of The Monsters of Templeton, great book, Arcadia, great book, Faith and Furies, Obama's favorite book and a brilliant book, as well as the short story collection Florida, which won the 2019 Story Prize, and Delicate Edible Birds. The reception of her next book, Matrix, has been phenomenal, just phenomenal. It's everywhere, and rightly so. We were just talking before we got on air about how Lauren is probably the most important writer in America right now. And I'm not just saying it, serious.
We were
So,
not talking about that. That's amazing, though. That's hilarious. But
so Emma Donahue agrees with me and calls it a thrillingly vivid, adventurous story about women in power that will blow readers' minds, left me gasping. It does indeed. Matrix is the story of 17-year-old Marie, too wild and big and unfeminine for courtly life, who becomes the prioress of an abbey. She hates it at first, longs for Eleanor, and then finds and transforms the abbey into a kind of creative utopia for women. It's violent, it's feminist, it's passionate, it's totally a brilliant book. So my first question for you is, I read that there's an amazing inception story of how this book came about, and I would love it if you would tell us that story.
so, yes, I will definitely tell you the story, but I actually have to say it's a three-part story. So just
Okay.
buckle in. I know.
Okay.
So the first part is that when I was in college, I wanted to be a medievalist. I went to a small liberal arts college and was able to take a tutorial my sophomore year in Ancien Français, which is Old French. And we did a lot of translations. And in this class, I fell in love with Marie de France, who was, in the 12th century, the first woman poet in the French language that we know of. So she's this groundbreaker. She wrote this book called The Lay, which is basically fabulous short stories in poetry form. They're incredible. They're really interesting. I encourage everyone to go read them. So I've been in love with her for about 20 years, just her mind. It's wild. Then the second thing that happened was I was coming back on a plane and I saw a movie called The Women. It's a 1940s black and white film.
It's a great movie.
It's an amazing movie.
It's a great movie.
And it's only women. But I was angry at this movie, even though it's like the premise is like the most extraordinary premise, because every conversation circled around a man or men, right. And so I was like, wow, that's awful, right? Like it's a great idea, but it's awful. And then the third thing that happened was I was flying on the plane back to a fellowship that I had at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies, which is this incredible place where people from all disciplines, from archaeology, from astrophysics, from like composers, not just artists, but people in all academic disciplines come together to do research and to talk to each other and sort of cross-fertilize. And it's wonderful. I mean, there were times when I was sitting at my co-fellows' lectures, and I was like, oh my gosh, I guess my next novel has to be on black holes because they are so amazing, and all I want to do is read about black holes for the next 3 years. So when I was here, I sat at this lecture by my beautiful friend, Dr. Katie Bugis, who is at Notre Dame, and she was giving this lecture on the liturgical practices of medieval nuns. And I knew nothing about this. I didn't think I was going to be interested in this talk, but I sat there and I was just blown away. She's one of the most passionate speakers I've ever seen, but two, she was talking about the daily rhythm of a nunnery, right? Where everything that they do is prayer, all the work that they do is prayer, and then they stop many times during the day. They do preem, lauds, terce. They do multiple different masses through the day in order to sort of raise their voices to God. And as I was sitting there, I sort of saw this book. I was working on a different book at the time, and I saw this book rise out of my love of Marie de France, and then the women that I just seen the night before, and then this lecture by Katie. And I stopped the book that I was writing before and started writing Matrix that very day. So I was, this is the way that my books happen, where like it's just a collision of ideas, and suddenly you see the project that
I
could
think
be.
I think that's fascinating. I also think there's something really fascinating about nuns. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a it's not a life that I would particularly want to live. Although the way it's presented, I'm going to show this beautiful cover again, in the Matrix, is almost a feminist kind of utopia. So before we start talking about that, I wanted to ask you about, if it's not too personal, about your own religious beliefs. Did that enter into writing this at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think you could even gravitate toward the subject matter as a writer unless you had some sort of deep sympathy
Right,
for
right, right.
fervent belief, right? So I was a deeply, deeply passionate child with no outlets for my passion other than sports and books. Um, and for a long time, I actually funneled all that into religion and religious ideas. My family, we went to church every Sunday, this Presbyterian church, this very old building in Cooperstown, New York. It's very beautiful, elegant, very tall ceilings. It's like being inside the bleach bones of a whale. Like it's very, very pretty. But we sat there for 3.5 hours every Sunday morning, rising up, sitting down, singing hymns off tune. Like my woolen tights slowly crept down my legs in like torturous like ways, and then finally settled it around my knees. It was horrible. So that was sort of my upbringing. And then when I got a Bible myself, right? I was given a Bible, and I can still smell it, right? Like, and the paper was like tissue thin, and it was all gilded on the other. It's just a
Yeah.
very beautiful object. I would sit there at night and I'd read the Bible, and just feel holiness, right? Like I would feel like a longing to be with something greater, a longing to be protected. I think, as I
Everybody
think
feels
children, yeah, but particularly children being almost powerless in this world of adults, where you really are not given autonomy over anything. But um and it's scary. Like the rules of the world are incompletely known when you're a child, right? And you need a guide. You feel like you need a guide, and sometimes your parents are there, sometimes they're in their own room sleeping. So I longed for God. I had a very fervent longing for God. And eventually, over time, that sort of filtered in, it became less a longing for God and more my attention shifted to literature. And I guess the same
Mhm.
fervency sort of carried over into the world of books.
So the thing about Matrix that I also love so much is that it's deeply rooted in history in the 12th century, and yet there's something so modern about it. It's a really strong feminist text. I mean, Marie spends a lot of times changing male pronouns to female pronouns in the text, which I love, which is many and think is blasphemy. Her 19 visions lead to very modern things: an underground labyrinth with a secret passage. She builds a scriptorium. She makes a lake and a dam so the women have a constant water supply. It's actually, she's creating a very modern, safe world for all these sisters. So, what I wanted to know was, did you know from the start that all this history would be so pertinent to modern times, especially today?
So, uh, I have many theories, Caroline, and you'll know that. Yeah, I think we already know this. Like we've talked about theories of literature. Um,
Right.
right. I think even as of 6 years ago, I think there was a point where I visited a university and I was like very full of myself at the time. And it's like, I will never write historical fiction again, right? Because if I do, I am betraying the contemporary world. And and I do think there are vast urgencies of the contemporary world that it is the duty of the artist to confront, right? The moral duty. It's a profoundly moral thing. So when this book and the next book, the one that I put aside in order to write Matrix, came to me, I knew that I wanted to write something that was like a tuning fork, where the past and the present are talking to each other over the span of time, right? And I wanted for this book, very, very particularly, my vision was to try to take I sort of trace back where we are now through the years, all the way back to see if maybe there was an inception back in the time of Eleanor Bagleton, of
Right.
Marie de France, right? Because I do think that a lot of um, the domination of this world, the sort of the outsized capitalism, the almost the society in which like a few countries are crushing the other ones underfoot. I think that leads all the way back through time, through Christianity in Europe to the Crusades, right? And of course, probably further back too. But I felt like the Crusades and that period said something very, very pertinent about how we get to now at the cusp of apocalyptic climate change, right? I think that there's something that maybe shifted a little bit then. And all I wanted to do in the inception was sort of see the way that perhaps the present can look back at time, and the past can look forward to the present. There's this amazing quote. I have to give this quote if you don't mind. So,
No, please do.
okay. It's actually an Allie Smith quote. Do you love Allie Smith? I mean, everyone loves Allie Smith, right? Like she's amazing. I have
Yep.
her shelf, like her whole shelf of books behind me. But she says, and I'm reading this because actually I have it on a post-it. A work of art unfixes time. The shaft opens. The past and present exist in the same moment, and we know as beings that we are connected, right? So that's something that I really wanted to sort of push really hard into if I were to pick up a book of historical fiction to try to write them. I would want for the past and the present to be in vibration.
I also want to talk about we're in history, but there's almost like this fierce roar of feminist sexuality in the book, which is very different from what the male gaze might say female sexuality is, and very different from what many religious people might say it was. In fact, the writing of the sex scenes was between, especially the ones between Cecily and Marie at the end, struck me as being as hallucinatory and powerful as the visions. They both seem to come from the same place to me. It struck me that the explorations of female sexuality in this, and also like in your book Fates and Furies, is another way of experiencing everything with ecstasy, not just God, but life and sex and other stuff. Would you agree? I kind of love
Caroline, this is like the greatest read. Yes, I'm so happy. Like, yes, this is a fundamental belief that I have, right? We are animals. We are deeply, deeply animals, even if we pretend we're not, even if we like
right.
bathe with soap every day and live in houses. And the way that we take in information, the way that we understand the world around us is through the body first, through the animal
Right.
body, through sense, vision, right? So the profoundest, the most meaningful changes in us happen not only at the level of the intellect, but it's through bodily understanding,
Yeah.
right? I feel like even in things that are abstract, even in say writing, for instance, I truly believe we don't fully understand the things that we know until we have physically manifested them somehow, right? Like it's almost
Mhm.
the act of of making the abstract concrete through the body, through the way that the body acts. So, yes. So I think that you're right that ecstasy and physical pain too, um, is something that this book is obsessed by, because I do think that probably for these characters and for me as the writer, God resides first in the body, right? And within the human body in particular, I think for these people in the
Yeah.
book too. And it is manifested, the joy is manifested bodily. I mean, think about ecstasy, right? It's like if you know you went for a really amazing run and you just feel great, it's your body's like buzzing, right?
Yeah.
It has some sort of joy in the very blood and in the air that you're breathing. So so yeah, all of those things are intimately connected in this spider web that I am so happy that you saw. I'm very glad.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So I want to also talk about there's something that Marie says in the book where or one of the characters says that great is not the same thing as good. Marie does not believe herself to be good or as good as the other nuns. And I sort of disagree with her interpretation. She says that because she's hardly a saint. She does extract revenge on another nun who might have visions like just a great, great part of the book. And it also, I wanted to connect it to Fates and Furies again, because in Fates and Furies, there's a composer in there who remarks, oh my God, it's really hard to live with a saint. It's exhausting. So Marie is hardly a saint, even though she does these extraordinary saintly things. Um, but I just felt that the good she did was extraordinary. So I wanted your personal thoughts. Is Marie great, good, or both?
Mm. I think her greatness lies in her ability to see very, very far and very, very clearly. And she has enormous faith in her own capabilities. Whether or not that faith is always justified, who knows? But I almost think that for I think she suffers a little bit from this idea of the hero. I think she suffers from the narratives of the day and like the savior narrative, right?
Right,
Because she sees herself projected into those roles, and even at, in the time of Marie, there were alternate narratives too. There, courtly romances, but there's always some sort of better hero at the heart of them. So she takes this, in my mind, erroneous vision and projects herself into that. So she believes herself to be great just because she's a little bit smarter than everyone else. She understands, she can read better. She understands math better. She was born a noble. You know, there are these hierarchies that have been embedded in her, and it's possible to me that I believe that her greatness, maybe her vision of her own greatness, does not line up with her actual greatness. I don't consider her a fundamentally good person, in that I think all people are a wild mix of both good and bad,
oh yeah.
that's relational and it shifts through time, constantly, and it's constantly being undermined, right? So I think that she's just very, very human, right? Like she's good sometimes, and often she's quite bad. But she always comes back to this profound love of her nuns, and I think
Mhm.
that if the argument is to be made that she's a good character, it's in that she just loves these women and she wants to make them
Yes.
thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, they're basically her sisters. I want to talk about climate change because
Mm.
in various interviews you've talked about how you think this is the most important thing in our lifetime, and I definitely agree. It was fascinating to me that the nuns, in trying to be self-sufficient and grow their own foods and do everything that we consider environmentally sound, they still disrupted the environment, even a little bit, even just a little bit.
Mhm.
So you've also said in an interview that this is one topic you feel that writers should be addressing. But how do you think writers can address this in a way that is going to galvanize people to do something, especially given since science has already said, well, it may be too late?
Yeah. I think at the core of this question is a different question, which is what is the use of art? And
Right,
um, my
right.
argument would be that the profound beauty of art is that there is no use in it, right? It's not utilitarian. We don't go to our novelists in order to change behavior.
Right, that's right. We go for
Right.
empathy and to
Well,
change the feeling.
yeah. I mean, we go for witness, I think, more than anything. We
Right,
go for feeling less alone in our enormous fear. And I think that's at least as major a motivation to write about climate change as any other, right? It's not that I don't think that work can galvanize people, as you said,
right,
or make activists out of people. I think it probably can. I just don't think that that's what for me, that's not the what I want, what I think art does, right?
right.
Right. I think it's a separate issue.
Okay.
Um, yeah, no, but this is like, I would love to talk about this for hours because I haven't really fully parsed my own ideas yet. I would like to actually um, but okay. But I do think making other people feel who have climate grief, who have climate anxiety, as I think we both do, and I think a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
people maybe watching do, make them feel accompanied in that is real. It's deep and it's good. Um, but also there's a negative side to this too, which is not talking about it feels not amoral, but actually immoral to me in a very real way because it is a diversion, right?
Mhm.
It's drawing attention away from this fundamental crisis that is going to affect every single one of us, right? So, and this is just personal, right? I really deeply believe that we all have our own relationship to what's going on, but I know that I don't know if I could ever write something anymore that's not inherently also about the way that humans disrupt the environment
Mhm.
and destroy, right? I mean, the destructive
Right.
aspects of humanity. And right, as soon as the first fire was made by like some ancestor throwing a rock at another rock, right? Like that was climate change. That humans have been changing the climate since before
Forever.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I also saw something online about you that I thought was just amazing, which had to do with your process. It was after you saw the Hilma af Klint show at the Met, and which I saw that show. It was just incredible.
Oh,
And
wasn't
you
it? Oh
said
my
that,
God. Yeah.
oh yeah, like just gasp worthy. You said you wanted to write something that looked like one of the paintings. That whole exhibit was called Paintings for the Future, which is a great, great title. And the
Mhm.
painting you were looking at was called Group X Altarpiece.
Mhm.
I thought this was the most amazing, tremendous way to work, incorporating visuals into your work
Yeah.
that impact your writing. So I wanted to know, do you do this with every book?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh
you
gosh. Yeah.
look at images and stuff, because I mean, I do
Yeah.
that, and I just looking at the images you had, and everybody should really look this up online because there's like beautiful sculpture and other stuff that inspired you, and you look at it and you think, "Oh my god," that painting sort of looks like whoops, like this cover in a way, where it sort of draws you in a very hallucinatory and fabulous way. So, do you do all that work of collecting images as you're writing, or before you're writing, or during, or there's no set rules?
There are no set rules. I mean, normally this book actually was slightly faster than my other books in terms of the amount of time it took me to write it. But usually it takes years and years to write a novel, and the slow accumulation of images happens. Like I put things into my notebook and I pick up my notebook and they all fall out, right? Usually, or like I post them on the room around me. Um, or I print things out and I put them on the wall because they're telling me something. And I think, and this is going to sound very mystical, but I I don't believe that my front brain, right, my intellectual brain actually does most of the good work in writing. It's always the back brain, the nonverbal, the part of the brain that's really comfortable with abstraction. and not certainty, right? And imagery. All of that sort of floating strangeness back there is what makes a book into a book, I
I
think.
love that you
Yeah.
said that. I absolutely love that you said that because I was going to ask you about the visions. When Maria's talking about the visions, they were definitely in a different realm. I believed them. I felt them as
Good.
I was reading it. I felt like I was taking an acid trip in a lot of ways. And I was wondering, I read it and I said, these are so vivid. I bet Lauren felt she was having these visions while she was writing them, that she was almost channeling these visions. Is that true?
Well, no, but but the truth is, I borrowed a lot from actual mystics of the time. There's almost, especially the ones that are maybe a little bit blasphemous or on the cusp of blasphemy.
Mhm.
I actually took a lot of that imagery from the mystics whose visions had been sort of transcribed into language. Um, so, for instance, sort of the God as a great brood hen in the sky, sort of dropping eggs, which makes God into a female character, right?
That's right.
Because a female chicken's the one that has the eggs.
That's right.
That comes directly from a medieval mystic, right? That is something that women have actually written about in the past in the Middle Ages. But I tried to like play with the deep symbology that they had at the time. I mean, a rose meant Jesus, right? Like, and to sort of like play with a lot of the ideas that I think we have that have been descended through time through the historical record.
I
Yeah,
was also really interested in this book is really about aging. I mean,
yeah.
we witness Marie from the young girl who first comes here up until the end of her book when she's in her 70s to her death. And at the end, there's this wonderful argument that Cecily and Marie have about beauty, where Cecily tells Marie that it was Marie's ugliness. She's like big and ungainly. She's not what women are supposed to look like. That made her powerful because she didn't have to have kids or be lost to history. Instead, she could make history. So the thing that I wondered about is after Marie dies, do you think that the passion and the ambition that she built for these sisters will continue? Did the nuns continue her legacy even for a while? Would they?
Ooh, this is the big question. Actually, I love this question because it makes me think about the ending of Middlemarch, right? Which
Right,
is my
right.
favorite book of all times, where Dorothea is sitting in the garden and there's this, the over voice, the George Eliot voice comes in and says, she may not have changed the world in a great way, but she changed it in very small ways. I can actually turn around and probably grab it and read it to you if you want me to. But it's this. Do you want me to? It's really
Sure. Go ahead.
okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Here we go. All right, right back. Okay. Sorry. This is my favorite book. I've had this book since college. This one. And it's the very, very, very end, the finale part. And it goes, but the effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive, for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. And that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. So there's there's a part of the end of this book that's a bit of a tragedy, and I don't want to give it away. But also I think that beautiful diffusion of like an effort to be good is real, right? And there are these gentle ripples that happen, and they may not be sorry, there's an echo. They may not be easily traced, but they're real and they're good and they make everyone's lives better. I have to believe this because I am a humanist at heart. I think that's the core of the human process or progress, or I guess experiment.
We were asking this question of you before in the green room, and I want to bring it up again because I think every single writer out there listening is going to want to hear it. We were talking about how we felt before you came into the studio, how we all felt that writing was just impossible and hard, and we all agreed that that the one person in the world it most likely was not difficult for was you, Lauren Groff. And when we asked you that, you said no, 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 no. So I would love for you to talk about your writing process a little bit more, especially because you said in an interview that your writing boundaries seem to be fading, and I wasn't quite sure what you meant. So I'd love it.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Oh, you don't?
But I do know. Okay, so this is all right. This is a thing. I'm ready to get into it right now. So I writing is hard, right? It's never easy to take the platonic ideal and try to make it into a concrete thing that you love and that other people will hopefully love, right? That's a translation built on faith alone. And sometimes faith wavers. I realized that if I sat down at my desk and it was just intensely difficult to actually write, I had to do a number of things. One is I allow myself to work on multiple projects at once, right? And that way you go to where the heat is, you go to where the energy is and the light and the love, right? So that if one day you're sitting down with your novel and you're just like, oh God, this thing again, we hate each other, like it's a bad marriage, like we're about to, right? Like we need therapy.
Right.
That's fine. Like go to a short story that's beautiful and like you're still in the early throes of just like trying to experiment with it and figure it out and try to find the joy again, right? That's something that is really, really integral to my process, which is if I'm not feeling joy in this particular thing, I can go to a place where there is joy. And I know there is because I have multiple things going all at once. But the other thing too is we are all under an enormous amount of strain, right? And we have been for a very long time at this point, right? It is just chronic at this point. And I think that the expectation of productivity comes out of capitalism, and capitalism is antithetical to art, right? It is the opposite of art in every single way. So to put capitalist pressure on ourselves to make something that when we're just feeling like crushed by the weight of the world, it feels wrong, right? It feels like deeply soul-killingly wrong. So this is what I do too. This is another like just actual just thing that I do in order to get around that. I will sit at my desk every day at the same time because I'm showing up for my work. I'm telling it I'm showing up for you. I try for at least an hour. Sometimes at minute 59, I catch the energy and then I go and then I'm going, right? Sometimes a full hour passes. I look down my clock. I'm like, thank God. And then I start to read because I think that that's the other job of the writer. The writer exists not only to write, they exist to read, to take beautiful things in. So it's not that writing is not difficult, but trying to remember sort of the larger scope, the inciting joy, letting oneself off the hook and not succumb to the pressure of capitalism. All of these things are good for the lives of we writers, I think.
So Kimberly and Ollie, do we have any audience questions? Okay, they're putting it up right now. It's going to come up in a banner. What am I? I thought it was a real intricate question. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's very cool. I just got back from an event in Nashville. I got my kid from school and walked in the door here. But I took with me 3 books to blurb. So far, I think I'm going to maybe do all 3 if I can finish them on time. One is by an Italian writer named Claudia Gerasanti, and it's coming out next year, but with Riverhead actually. One is from the poet Javier Zamora. I can't remember the title of the book, but it's so good. It's like a memoir. And I can't remember the third one at this point. Sorry. So that's what I'm reading now. And I also am reading Joy Williams's Harrow, which like I should have read weeks ago, but that's the other thing that I'm in the middle of.
Do we have another question? I have more questions if we don't. Yes. What is your plan for? Oh, yeah. What is your plan for the other book you put aside to write Matrix? Are you going to return to it?
Yes. Okay. So, yes. I really love this book that I put aside. It's called The Vaster Wilds. It's about, it's basically a female Robinson Crusoe in 1609. And because it's in the Elizabethan era, I had so much fun using Elizabethan language and like the rhythms, right? It was like stylistically, it could not be more different from Matrix. So knock on wood, we'll see. It's possible it'll come out in a few years in 2023, I think. Definitely not 2022, but 2023, if the world's still around then.
Yeah, there's always that. Do you,
I know.
oh, here we are. Earlier you stated that literature does not influence behavior. My knee-jerk reaction is to disagree with this statement, i.e. the Bible or the Quran. But can you elaborate on this statement?
Yeah, I didn't say that literature does not influence behavior. I think I said that the purpose of literature is not to influence behaviors, because there is literature that obviously does influence behavior. I mean, even something like Uncle Tom's Cabin, right, influences people's behavior. There are the books and other works of art that have changed societies. But I don't believe that art is utilitarian. I don't think it exists on the planet in order to change people. If it does do that, right? If it does do that, that's a side effect, right? And I do think that real art is something that does shake the foundations of what you believe, right? That's what art is and what it does. It goes into your certainties and it makes them quake a little bit. And maybe that's the difference between art and not art, right? Like between perhaps a painting that you find on the street and take home and it's really pretty on the wall, but it doesn't sort of shake you, and like a Rothko that you see in an art museum where you just stand in front of it and just weep. But of course, it's all about the individual audience, the person seeing it too. Yeah, I don't know. I think about this all the time, right? This is something that is like deeply unsettled in me. There's a line in Asphodel, That Greeny Flower by William Carlos Williams about, and I'm going to paraphrase because I never get it right, about poetry. Oh God, poetry is not news or something, but men die every day from want of it, right? So it feeds us, but its intention is more to accompany, more to shake up, more to remind you what it is to be alive and to be human, right? But that none of those things are made in order to change human behavior, right? Because then you tip into the realm of the pedantic, right? Or the realm of the polemical. And I think it's possible for polemical art to be actual art. I think possibly a polemic actually takes away from any artistry that is actually there. This is a personal opinion, but I feel pretty firmly about it.
Okay. We have another question from Jill Swenson. Thank you, Jill. Do you incorporate music into your writing process? And if so, in a similar way that you do for visual arts?
Jill, thank you for the question, because I've wanted so desperately to talk about music this entire time.
Oh, great.
No, but nobody's asked me about this book and music. So with this book, I actually had a playlist, and it began as obviously like a playlist of nuns singing psalms, right? Which is what they did. But then it sort of took strange directions. And I started listening to like a cappella versions of Leonard Cohen songs sung by women.
Oh,
It's
wow.
really good. I know, right? Because Leonard Cohen is
Yeah.
this great mystic himself, right? He's like astonishing. And then there was a song that my friend Kaveh Akbar, who's this poet, sent to me, and it's Parola. It's like this Italian song by Donna Teodossi, and it's almost like trance-like. And it's just one woman speaking Italian very, very fast over this beat, but it gets higher and higher, and like I don't know, it's very ecstatic
Wow.
in a very modern way, and so that came into the playlist. And so there were points where I would just go for a run, play the playlist, and in the back of the mind where all the abstractions are happening and coming together and falling apart, this music somehow did something and changed the ideas and changed the story in the back of the
That's
mind.
so fascinating. What were you listening to when you were writing the visions?
Yeah, I think at that point, I had that was a very slow process to write the visions, to be honest. Like I had to make lists, and then I had to extrapolate
Really?
from the lists. And
It
so
just
yeah.
it just flowed out.
No,
I
no,
mean, you read
no.
like it flowed out, so that's really interesting to
That makes
hear.
me so happy. Thank you.
Wow. That's so interesting. Yeah, that's the inner brain working. Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So I have kind of an odd question I need to ask you, which is, it's about fame. Is it is it unnerving for you when people tell you that you're considered to be one of America's best living writers? Do you laugh? Do
I
you feel like, "Oh, I hope I stay up there," or do you feel a responsibility to stop yourself, or do you have to just stop and remind yourself that, "You know what? It's about the work. It's
yeah.
just about the work and the writing, and the rest is sort of nonsense or not nonsense."
Well, thank you for saying that. I think right now is the most vulnerable time, right? Because your work is away from you. It's really, really hard to spend that hour focusing on other work because it's just not coming well, right? And because there's attention, right? And attention is hard. I have to tell you, I developed a plan to work through all this like stress and strain. And this was, I think, 3 books ago. I realized that I had to actually kind of dissociate a little bit. And I know that that comes out of the language of trauma, and it's not traumatic to be a writer in public, but it can be, right? It could be. So I become 2 separate people when a book is in the world and it's getting some attention. There's the author, and the author is the one talking to you right now, right? The author is the one signing books and trying really, really hard not to read any reviews, right? But the writer is this incredibly tender, very, very, very vulnerable, very soft person that needs to be protected. And the person protecting the writer is the author. So like this person has to be fiery and hard. And this person gets to be as soft and beautifully receptive as possible. And I just had to develop these 2 people. And it's not like they're actually 2 people, obviously. But in the beginning, I did actually have to like put on a bracelet in order to be author and take it off to be not the author, right? It's just a way of separating and making sure that the writer doesn't listen to people praising because I think that's just as bad as listening to the negative reviews, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want to feed your ego on your work. In fact, the ego is the worst thing for the work, period, right? Like so separating the ego and the work is the only thing that makes one survive, I
Mhm.
think. Yeah.
There's a wonderful quote, I think it's Martha Graham said, that it's not your business to listen to what the critics say your business is to dance. And I thought, oh, that's really great. I really love that. Okay, we have time for one more question. Do we have another question? Otherwise,
No.
I can ask one. Let me see what question I didn't ask. Oh yeah, what question didn't I ask you that I should have asked?
No, so that's never like I don't know. Like you did great. You asked wonderful questions. What's the
Well,
weather like where you are? Yeah.
I want to show this absolutely phenomenally gorgeous book, Matrix. You can get it at bookshop.org or your favorite indie bookstore. It's breathtaking. It's totally transformative read. And I want to thank the transformative Lauren Groff for being here and being so great and so much fun to talk to. I want to thank everybody who came here to listen in and to ask questions. And I want to thank our brilliant producers, Kimberly and Ollie. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Thank you.